Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to the R.A.C.E Wednesday Live Talks. This week, we are looking at a very exciting topic, grades and skills, what really matters. And I'm having two wonderful, wonderful human beings with me. I'm feeling truly lucky, privileged, and blessed to have them in this conversation. Their insights personally, to me, matter a lot. So I'm very excited about this discussion. So let me start with Tamara. Tamara currently is working at the Emirates School Establishment in the assessment department, but she's also known for organizing retreats for teachers, lead teachers, looking after the well-being of her colleagues. Out of job scope, it's not part of her job description, but she loves doing that, and she's well known for that as well in the UAE, in the northern part of the UAE, in Ras Al Khaimah. So welcome, Tamara. It's very good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And Dr. Laurence Brown, who is really, really one of those people I feel very blessed to have and to know in my life. Very knowledgeable, very experienced, very humble, and very open-minded. So those qualities, when they come together, in the case of somebody who is an educator, as well as trainer, mentor, director, and many, many other roles, it's just amazing. And it's really an inspiration to know you, Laurence. So thank you for accepting our invite for tonight.
Thank you, Beatrix. Nice to be here.
Of course. Nice to have you both. So we have to tell you, everybody listening there, that we started this conversation a little while back. We met like half an hour before this live, and we started talking about grades and skills. And one of the things that we were looking at is really how to find that balance. And when we were looking at some examples from the US, or we are looking at them, and we can see examples of those curricula bringing up skills. Whereas if we're looking at countries like India or Pakistan, then maybe grades matter more. So when we look at this, grades and skills, when I look at it as a spectrum, two ends of the spectrum for some reason, where is the balance? How to find the balance? What do you think about this?
Tamara.
I think it depends on the learning outcome. Now, I think they go hand in hand, but I do believe there is currently too much emphasis on grades. When you think about the effects that it has on the children, on the students, the level of stress, the level of burnout, the level of even confidence, self-esteem, worthiness, all these things that even as a life coach, we see these same attributes in adults. It starts with being labeled with regards, if you're going to measure performance by grades, then you categorize, and it's not a fair assessment on a student's or a person's capabilities. Someone may just not test very well, but they have the knowledge. So I do believe that there is a time for grades, but I do believe there's too much focus on it, and it's to the detriment of the student. Laurence?
Yeah, I think it depends on the audience you're asking, and when you ask, I completely agree with you. There is too much emphasis, but there are reasons for that. I think in the 50s or 60s, you'd have received the response that grades were really necessary. That would have been parental and employer expectations. But in the here and in the now, I'd be surprised if that were the case. So, we're faced with tumultuous changes in the way we live, like the COP26 right now, witnessing the complexities and shifts in the way we've lived and must live in the future. So we've got climate change and societal change, technological change. They're on the way for my own children, right? Well, my own kids. My daughter's 14 now. and she's making FE and HE choices, and she's stressing. She's really anxious, as you alluded to. You know, we faced, I think, when I was their age, we faced real and present nuclear threats, and we doubted if we would live into our 20s, and they face dangers now from all directions. And I think with little positivity on the horizon from those who might hold the power to enforce paradigm shifts to offer a brighter future. So I think young people, know that we need to shift the entire educational system across to more life-worthy skill sets, for example, so that they can collaborate and create and innovate if they're to stand any chance, of a future for their own children. My 19-year-old daughter is already suggesting she's never going to bring a child into this world. I just think that's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
When I was listening to you, I was also thinking of the IQ and EQ. The IQ and the EQ being more about the social skills and something that we realized how important they are, and something that kind of came more to the foreground when Corona and online learning and teaching suddenly just happened overnight, and everybody was kind of forced to enter a new reality. And there were more questions about, so how are you today? So what is the story you want to share today? Or how are you feeling? Or let's just talk, let's just have a conversation. So it feels like a little bit of a wake-up call, a little bit of an invitation to invite social emotional intelligence into the equation and pay more attention to it. There are more posts around mindfulness, and also there have been initiatives even previously with that project-based learning that are getting their voice back now, and they have a stronger presence now. And it seems that the gates of the world of education now opening up again. Do you
Absolutely.
see this, or do you see something different? Or what is it that you are noticing?
I think it's regional. I think, like Laurence said, it depends on who the audience is and their experience. For me, I would say I've got 4 M's. 2 are kind of stuck together. I think mindset, message, and methods and measurement. First, it's about changing the mindset. For those who believe that grades are paramount to have success, or it's a requirement for success, then that mindset needs to be changed. And then once that mindset changes, then you can reframe the message that goes out, not only to the parents. So I think mindset starts at the top for the system, and then the parents will have a different message, and so will the teachers and the students. It needs to change at that level, because you have tertiary institutions that require a certain GPA. If you don't meet that, then you can't get in. And, a lot of things are tied to the success or perceived future if you don't get into a certain school or you don't study a certain subject. So then I say changing the mindset, reframing the message, and then diversifying the methods and measurements, so that students are tested on not just knowledge but skills. And for those that are more skills-based or specialized skills or applied, then more focus should be put on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our school system is designed to promote the fixed mindset, and it's not allowed really to nurture a growth mindset.
Very true.
Yeah, if you think that kids at school won't be retiring, let's say kids in elementary schools, they won't be retiring until around 2070, 2075. If you think about the changes that'll be wrought upon them, they'll have to adjust and live successfully through. There is no way an academic education can do it if it's not competency based and assessed in a formative way that's fair, like a portfolio outcome. A bit like, for example, our new colleges, our technical colleges. They're so-called new, but they're just a resurgence of what we had in the 60s and 70s. The apprenticeship training in schools and colleges now that's moving that way. There are about 10 different ways for assessing somebody and their distance and their journey along their learning path. It's much more fair and equitable, I think, to test them that way than it is to give them a standardized testing at the end of the year that puts them under huge pressure. And by the very bell curve itself is designed to fail 30% of them at source, just to tell 30% of young people, no, you're a failure. You're a failure. Mm-hmm. It's just ludicrous, really. Yeah. Abusive, I think.
So we have a comment from Akram, and hi Akram, about the question of the episode. He thinks that we need both, and we must have both. So we do agree with you, Akram, absolutely. And one thing I was just thinking about is that there is a demand, need and demand, something like, a market kind of terminology. So is there a need for it? Now that the world opened up and we don't talk about regional anymore, you can join any university that you want. Everybody is going online and live and opening it up to the global community. And somehow I personally feel that the value of having college and university degrees are also questioned. Do we still need that? Big companies announcing, oh, we don't need it. We just want to look at your skills. And are you ready to come in, bring your skills, be a good team player, think out of the box, bring your ideas and critical thinking? Somehow the whole, concept that I had around education and that box that we want the students to enter when we say, okay, grades and meet these criteria, somehow it's just like, it's just coming to pieces.
Yeah.
And it seems that the whole thing is just going more to have those skills, educate yourself, be more certain about your interest, about your goal, about your vision for the future. It becomes more important who you want to be than where do you want to graduate from.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Oh, we got 2 more comments from Akram, and I'm happy to listen to you after. The one is that certificates are useless if they are not combined with the skills that make your work outstanding. Absolutely. We do have many certificate holders not having those skills that the certificate stands to provide. And those academic planning departments all over the world maybe now are taking their role more seriously, or there is more pressure on them to compare what they offer and can it really be measured when it comes to skills. And another thing Akram is saying, that it's not possible to develop your skills effectively if you don't have sufficient qualifications for this. It is time to revolutionize existing education systems. Yeah, so this is, something that I'm noticing, that the words revolutionize, reimagine, redesign, are coming up more and more often now, especially in the field of education. How do you feel about it?
I was in a webinar a few months ago about this topic, and Dame Alison Peacock is a leader in education policy in this country and has been for decades, held in high regard. And she was asked by one of the participants quite clearly, will the government ever let go of standardized testing and teaching to the test so that we can expand and add value to the curriculum? And she said, no, they won't. And the reason they won't is because there's far too much money held by our O and A level certificate testing system here. There is far too many billions of pounds brought in as we sell it all over the world. And the government are too scared to let go and risk the status quo by lowering the power ratios within the class system.
Yeah. It does come down to that fear at the top, isn't it? That uncertainty, or that something not letting go of it from the few. Yeah, but even if it's the desire of the many.
But, it's still in the West, generally in America and England, Canada almost. It's still the white middle class male who makes the decisions, and it really is. Look at the politics in England at the moment. That's just been going down the toilet for the last few years. These people who make the decisions and work to help their friends get contracts, they are from the leading public schools. They are usually males, middle-aged males, who went to Eton and Cambridge and Oxford. It's not a diverse political system. It needs to be more diverse, and it is becoming that way, but I think it'll take another 2 generations. But if 2 generations, well, if every 5 years is a generation of kids going through school, then you're talking about another 4 or 5 generations of kids going out into the world ill-prepared for this tsunami of change that's coming their way. They don't have the armor. They're not prepared. And as you were talking earlier about, real skill sets, political and skill sets for life, we've now accrued this year around 120 skill sets that people have said should be taught somehow or other to young people before they have to face the world on their own.
Yeah.
I just wanted to just point out the rise in the knowledge industry, what they call the knowledge industry. And I think there's a mixed message going out to the younger generation, because they see success, however you just define success, but they see success through different entrepreneurs who didn't finish college, for example, who dropped out, who did all these things. So they're seeing this in real life, in their lifetime, and then they're experiencing a school system that's stuck in the past, and also perhaps at home expectations and mindsets that are fixed, like you said. So I think it's a little bit challenging for the younger generation to have a clear understanding of how to measure their own performance.
Yeah.
When they have these, and it's good to have a variety, but then it's to give them the tools they need to make the right decisions. Because let's face it, you do need grades for some things. Like if I have a doctor or whatever, I want to know that he knows certain things. He has the knowledge. I can trust that. But I also want a surgeon who's skillful, right? Who's had the experience, who's had the practice, and not just the knowledge. So they go hand in hand, But I think today, more than ever, I don't know, but I think going forward, it's definitely going to be an explosion of less focus on grades going forward.
Well, the Australians moved this way in Queensland 30 years ago. In the mid-90s, they realized that employers all over Australia were saying, I get O and A level students coming to me and they're giving me these certificates. I have no idea who to hire because they can't talk about anything. They don't have any experience to talk about. So I just get, 4 people in front of me with C grades and I don't know who to hire. So they brought in what they call the Futures Curriculum in Queensland. And it was portfolio-based. It was portfolio-based internship learning. And the kids, of course, understood the relevance of that. And they had intrinsic motivation. Because if you think about high grades, they've always been supposed to be an organic and natural outcome of intrinsic motivation, to apply extra effort to learn and regurgitate facts in the industrial age standardized national testing systems that we have, but not anymore. And not for these past 30 years or so, because motivation for the application of effort in the classroom has dropped to being purely instrumental. And if you think about it, it's in direct alignment to the increasing distancing of the curriculum and the syllabus and the teaching methods from the realities of the needs of today and of tomorrow. And kids know this. They're not daft. They're distanced daily from the realities of their future.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
Yeah. Akram seems to agree with us in everything we are saying. So when I'm just going to pull up a few of your comments, Akram, when you are saying that developing student skills in all areas of life, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's a bit of a summary, of what we were talking about in the last few minutes. And also that when formulating school curricula and intermediate and secondary level, is the important thing is that we are studying the needs of the labor market and providing study specialization. Absolutely, because the two go hand in hand. And now there are more and more conversations around it. Let's ask what the market needs and align a little bit those skills. Whereas previously there was not really much communication. And again, a little bit previously, I think when we talk about industrialization, there was a lot of communication because they said, this is what we need. We just need factory workers. Let's train them. And then it kind of stayed that way. So that communication, that dialogue didn't restart again until like maybe a few years back. And now it keeps coming up more and more often. One of the things when we mention skills and we mention the grades and how it has been and how it's going to be is what Akram and we also mentioned, is to study what's really needed and to look into the skills that they bring, to look into what is going to be used, and it makes it very obvious for them that I need that if I want to be there. But also somehow, when we started this conversation, and I mean, prior to the live, we talked about how much curriculum we have, and teachers always seem to be in a rush, and they are so anxious covering that curriculum and just getting ready for the test. As soon as the test is over, they are like, okay, let's do it again. And and you already know this, that we really teach by example. We are leading by example. This is the example that the students are seeing day in and day out. Anxious teachers, always rushing, always in a hurry. They never have enough of that curriculum and content. They always want to teach more. And in fact, what they are really teaching is just this mindset, this approach, this attitude. So the whole essence of the teaching, kind of, we are throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and it's just not happening. And we think in our head as teachers, in the school, following a curriculum, oh yeah, we are doing an amazing job. I'm writing my lesson plans. I'm covering the topics. I'm correcting all the papers. I'm doing everything I can. And then it turns out that what the students are taking away is completely different. But where is the realization point? Where does awareness start? And how do we raise awareness of this?
I think those are very good points, very, very valid points. And just speaking from experience with vocational practice and doing assessments and curriculum and observing teachers, I think it starts with having the curriculum, first of all, that lends itself for an applied setting, measurement, testing in the form of observation or presentation or simulation, things like this, job experience, on the job experience, things like this. But I think it comes also through professional development for teachers, because remember, they are also a product of the educational system. So they've also learned that mindset and learned those practices. So I think it's an opportunity for professional development for those teachers who may carry that same mindset into the classroom. So that's a very valid point. And I do see that, and they're doing the best that they can, but those are the tools that they have, right?
Yeah.
If we could provide an opportunity for them to reframe the message and change the mindset, that would be really good.
Yeah, but they themselves need to be upskilled.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of the science topics, STEM topics especially, the advances in technology, the teachers are being left behind because they're not working in complete alignment with corporations, with professionals. In universities, you can't keep a degree running or a master's degree running. It'll be closed down if your quality assurance doesn't show that very regular integration with corporations and industry, and bringing industrial professionals in to actually give problem-based learning. Well, teachers don't have that. They're not afforded that possibility. Once they get into a school, they're stuck in a school. And I think, I think this is actually noticeable by the few teachers who actually use LinkedIn. They get fixed into a kind of tenured mindset in a school, and they just want to stay there. They don't see beyond that. And once you've been a teacher for a few years, it's very difficult to go out into anything except marketing, because marketing assumes you have communication skills. Teachers should have communication skills. But they get so fed up teaching day in, day out, because it's the first time in history teachers, per se, don't know what they're training kids for. And neither do the administrators, neither does anybody. If you look at the 2020 World Economic Forum Futures of Work report, it states that we will lose 85 million jobs in the next 5 years to the advance of technology. But on the good side, there'll be 100 million new opportunities for brand new jobs in the next 5 years. But that means half the people in work right now need some fairly serious upskilling if they're to remain employable. So if teachers don't know what they're training people for, and the syllabus was designed 100 years ago, and the teaching methodologies are the same, then I don't understand how the teachers can be expected to prepare young people for a future in life skills, because they're not skilled for it. They're not given the opportunity. And as you rightly pointed out, Tamara, there's no time. If they're to get through the syllabuses, they're doing what they do to my daughters. Both of my daughters, O-levels and A-levels, GCSE and A-levels. I've spent 3 years back in England watching them crying over their homework at midnight. And I just want to go into school and rip somebody, because what they're doing is abusing my kids. I'm actually paying them by my taxes to abuse my kids, not the teachers, but the administrators of the school systems, simply because they're trying to get through syllabuses that aren't particularly relevant to their futures, and the kids know that, so there's a lack of motivation. The classes are all about, in the first of 3 semesters in an academic year, I'll rush through the syllabus so that I can then chill a bit and start preparing stuff for next year. What I'll do is I'll just throw past question papers at the students. I'll just throw them past question papers and I'll grade them. And over the next 2 semesters, they'll get up to test standard. Well, that doesn't do a lot for the kids' morale, does it, really? When they're constantly getting low grades in tests, and they're simply being moved from one test to the next, as you said, Tamara. One test, rush to the next test, rush to the next test. You can't expand and make a curriculum interesting in that environment.
Yeah.
It certainly isn't. It's not going to engage kids who are already disengaged.
Yeah. We are talking a little bit in that loop here. So we say that the teachers have to be trained. And then if you look at the teacher training programs and the actual university programs where teachers are trained, then those are very often also just about the curriculum and just covering the curriculum and getting them ready for the exam. So it's kind of an ongoing,
It's a vicious circle,
Yeah, a very, very much vicious circle, as much as if we think about the how much it's demanded by the actual setup of the society of the given country, and they're just not wanting to let it go because of economical reasons, because of scare, because of anxiety, because of the mindset that people are having in the society, which goes back again to their own schooling. So there is another vicious circle again. And those countries where they have made it, for example, probably Finland, Denmark, Australia, couple others as well, they like those examples. So they bring those examples in and say, hey, they are doing an amazing job in Finland. Let's just do it. And it's not a copy-paste. It is a societal change.
They've
It's a
discovered,
change at
haven't
every single level. And they realize it very early on. So then those schools kind of embedded in a different society. They just don't have roots, and they just fade away.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Having worked all over the world, I see the Japanese system, and I understand how that works. And that works by what you said, Tamara, getting into the best schools and getting the best grades to get to the next school, to get to the next school. And if you slip off that pathway, you're going to fall into a disrepair. You're not going to get to the university of your choice. And actually, that was brought home to me when I went to live in Nagasaki, because the lady at the end of the street I was living at was arrested for killing a 5-year-old girl to make a place at the elementary school for her 5-year-old boy to get in, because that was the elementary school they had to go to get to that high school, to get to that university. And if you can get to that university, Mitsubishi will take you in as a trainee. And that's when you really start to learn the skill sets you need after university, is when you really get to need those skill sets. And it's trained purely by the corporation that employed you. So that by the time you're 25, 30, you're a world-leading expert in R.A.C.E systems for Mitsubishi. And you go off and give conferences around the world. So moving from that system to the UAE was a bit of a shock, as you can imagine. Working with Emirati boys in Abu Dhabi on Zayed Military City was a bit of a shock to the system after that, But what happened then was the Singaporean teacher training system was brought over to Bahrain University. The entire system was brought and placed in Bahrain University in a special teachers college. And it failed miserably because Bahrainis are not Singaporeans, and they learn in different ways. They're an oral culture for a start, and expectation. I think it lasted 3 years and they just went away. But you're absolutely right. What works in one country like Finland will not necessarily work elsewhere, as has been discovered.
Yeah.
You mentioned, both of you mentioned that we need new skills. And, this is one of the things that when they started raising awareness of Expo 2020, then they were all doing the awareness raising workshops, having tours for the schools, and saying that, future professions, skill sets you will need for future jobs, names of those, imaginary future jobs. We don't know them yet, but do we spend any time asking questions about it? Are we interested in it? Do we generate some discussion within the education system, within the classroom, within the school community, the teachers community? Hardly ever. So future is coming, and we just keep on going like, future is coming. We don't know, but we don't even ask. And if we don't ask, we have the certainty and we have the anxiety both. So we don't want to ask. What if?
But if the system is not designed to allow for Socratic questioning, for example, by teachers flipping classes, it's not designed to allow for that. So teachers are hidebound, they're handcuffed. So, and school administrations are handcuffed. I don't believe they're blinkered. I just believe they're handcuffed by the powers that be, and actually threatened with financial, incentives to keep going that way.
True. Yeah.
So it's a systemic problem. And now in America or Canada, over the last year, I've been doing all this research, and I see, especially in America and Canada, that localities can actually make changes to the way in which kids are taught. They can open charter schools, for example. They have meetings where the local governance will come and meet them and talk to them, and there is money available within that to actually make changes like there was in Australia. Again, it's a massive country with disparate needs. And so those needs are to a certain extent catered for if enough parents require it in their area and if the money's available, hopefully. Whereas we, on the other hand, we've got 67 million people here in a place half the size of Texas, all crammed in, and complete federal control, complete governance by government, no leeway given whatsoever. So we're a bit more tied than I think in places in Canada and places in America and places in Europe as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What I found here, I'm a part of a system that I feel is trying to find its way to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Looking at what works in other places and trying to make it fit.
Yeah.
And that trial and error, those growing pains.
Yeah.
But I do see the effort. I do see the intention. I do see
Yeah.
focus in certain areas. For example, different academies that they have here that are focused on certain things. So I think in the UAE, they're definitely driving change.
Yeah.
But I
They
think it will take time.
They always have done. They've always allowed professionals such as your good self autonomy. They will listen to what you've got to say. Praxis, reflective praxis, is enabled. Maybe not in the individual schools so much with teachers, but in the hierarchy above, the umbrella organizations, they want to develop. They want to become the best, and they will put the money into it, and they will hire people like you who are the best. I mean, 20 years ago, I was given freedom across the nation to bring in the first blended degree into the UAE HCT. And I wrote it and I put it in, and we wrote it as we went along. We co-constructed it with Abu Dhabi Men's, Abu Dhabi Women's, Dubai Men's, Dubai Women's. And we were given carte blanche to do it, and it was externally examined and it went great. And Sheikh Nayan was really happy, and so were the young people. But I was given that autonomy only because I was there at the right place in the right time. And I think you're very lucky to be in a country like that. Whereas if you're in India or Pakistan, for example, or Asia, the more conservative countries where there's a great deal more parental control, then you're hidebound to stick to the system as is. And if you don't conform, you're out. I mean, I've just come back from a school system in Pakistan where the turnover in schools for teachers was 30% every year.
Wow.
30%. How can you possibly train teachers with a turnover like that? Wow. Unless you've got very short, bite-sized and impactful learnings that can immediately be taken to the classroom. And you have that autonomy, I believe, in UAE. You're lucky in that regard. Stay there. Don't get rushed to leave.
It's interesting, Beatrix, you both mentioned the link to culture. And I wonder if there's a gap as well with culture and the generation gaps, because there's a link to culture. So what works in one place may not work in another. But I wonder, because of the information age and kids in Pakistan or Japan or, in Sweden, they all have access to the same things, the same platforms. I wonder if there's not a lot of difference as much as there was before, and now teachers, students, they feel as if culture may not impact learning as much. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. For example, having access to entrepreneurship and being online, using social media or making YouTube videos, and so I think the mindset, like I said, changing the mindset is going to be key. And perhaps it's a little bit like business, where the customers push a product, or they demand change in products or services, and the producers have to listen because of buyer's power. Perhaps a change will come from the bottom. I don't know. It's interesting though, because when you think about what we imagine the future to be in terms of technology, and you talked about how economy drives curricula. What is that going to look like with the same foundation? I can't imagine. I've had kids in a vocational setting. They've imagined having a robot for a teacher in the classroom. I can't imagine that being the same structure we have now.
There is a kind of, even that robot in the classroom for me, it just kind of brings this this idea, and also this passion I have for people to be responsible for their own learning from a very young age. Independent learning was something have been talked about for a long time, and suddenly when Corona started, then it's just kind of the whole reality hit everyone. Were they ready? Well, maybe not everyone. So it was a little bit of test. Yes, you are talking about independent learning. Is it really happening? Let's see. And now it's more probably, again, this bell is ringing that get your students ready, as well as showing them, setting the example of being able to lead your life, of being able to take responsibility for your own growth, for your own learning. And still, when we go to the level of the curricula, I don't know to what extent it's present there. Or when we go to a leadership as well as professional development plan for teachers, do we have these competencies or this backbone somewhere hidden? I don't know, but there is a very, very visible need for it.
I think where there's a need, it will build it and they will come. I think where there's a need, it will take time, and it will take organization, it will take collaboration across similar-minded individuals. But it's happening already. I mean, there's an American school system that was set up 4 or 5 years ago. I can't for the life of me remember the name now. I want to say Aston School, but it's not. And they've gone back to the village learning system, a community learning system. And they don't want teachers, they want coaches. They only have coaches, and they will train people who are not teachers to be coaches. And it's all about questioning groups. And kids are not divided into ability. They're not divided into age groups. They're in a schoolroom. It's a schoolroom learning, and it's taken off all over the world. I was amazed when I got to Pakistan to find there was one in Karachi that had just opened up.
Wow.
Absolutely remarkable. A real community-based group work, peer support learning system that was not academic, but it was based around the needs of future life. Absolutely remarkable. There is a lot going on out there. But yeah. I had an interesting, I've been watching my own girls for the last 3 years, and their need, of course, we've been online a lot because they've been COVID, but their reliance upon the internet to do anything, my reliance upon the internet to do anything, it's overtaken Google, right? YouTube has overtaken Google, I think. We use it. We don't have my grandfather's skill sets. My granddad could do his own plumbing. He didn't need the television set or a computer to show him how to do every little job. He had it in here. Now, what happens with my daughters 10 years down the line if they have every reliance for everything they need to know on a computer, on the internet, and the electricity's cut? They're going to last 24 hours before they go stir crazy. They can't even get in the car and drive to school without going to their telephones. Now, this may seem trivial, but I think watching a film that came out 4 years ago, called Into the Forest, brought it home to me. The film, I think, takes place in Canada, Into the Forest. And it brings home to you just how dependent we are upon those very services that will be cut in social upheaval. Our NHS hospitals 4 or 5 years ago were hacked into by, they say, the Russians. We had equipment stopped. Our gas is now being threatened. Our gas supplies are being threatened. Electricity supplies this week have been threatened by France. They're going to start cutting our electricity. It's going to happen in these kids' lifetimes. and quite soon, I think, that their whole foundation for all the skill sets they've got will be suddenly taken away overnight. What on earth are they going to do then? We had encyclopedias we could go to. There are no encyclopedias in my house. Do you have encyclopedias in your house for them to back up? No? Well, we don't. And I think maybe we should think about, going off to some secondhand bookstores and looking for some encyclopedias, because without them, well, I'm just saying.
You just brought back some memories there. Encyclopedias, yeah.
Into the forest. Look at it.
Thank you. I will definitely have a look. That was an important point Tamara mentioned about our students having access to the global community. And I was thinking when you mentioned, Laurence, the village community or the smaller community, the community schools, and all those small initiatives going and got started, the recent years, and maybe even decades, we just didn't know as much prior to the internet age. They are also supporting each other, but at the same time, they are also pioneers in their own field, where they initiate something, they are doing something good, and they are following up, and they are inspiring others. And when we think of the idea of the world becoming like one big village, it's also true that within this one global village, we still have the small communities as the core power, as the core community, and the power of that community.
Yeah.
Because even if we have access to the word, we still appreciate somebody sitting down with us and listening to us in a face-to-face, especially now, it's more precious.
Yeah.
So that's and those small initiatives, they do have more independence, but also dedication and commitment and responsibility, because they see how important what they bring and how much it's needed already. So there was a point mentioned by Tamara mentioned a few minutes ago, that it might be from bottom up, it might be from top down, it might just be from a dialogue, that we start a dialogue around this.
Yeah, well, we have a huge growth, especially in the last 18 months, on online communities. So we started at the beginning of lockdown 18 months ago. We started an online community for young people around the world who had gone into lockdown but could connect to each other on a regular basis and become, friends and learn from each other. And it's Link Online Learners, linkonlinelearners.org. And I found out yesterday that we've reached 60 countries in the last 18 months, hundreds of kids. And actually the British Council have put Link Online Learners up for possibly an award in their innovative education topics for the last year. But once again, I'll say it once again, you're continually relying on the internet.
Yeah.
Which is now going to become, the most sought after tool in any social strife.
Mm-hmm.
And even those communities that can come, even collaborative, scientific communities around the world, they all depend on it. So it becomes a target. What backup have we got? If it was taken offline for just a week, where's our backup? And I think this is extremely important, and people are not asking the question, what's the backup? I mean, if 67 million people in England, 10 million children at school every day, we entrust 10 million children at school every day in this country to a government who didn't even have a plan B for safety. Now, the first rule of any risk assessment is safety. Health and safety of our children is paramount. There was no plan B for an infectious disease.
Mm-hmm.
The local school here, the A-level school here, the teachers had never done any online teaching or even any online courses before themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved with the school. I asked the question, No teachers had been involved with online learning. And then overnight, bang, they weren't ready for plan B.
Yeah.
You know, if that's what a G8 country is lack of preparation, then it's something that really needs to be taken quite seriously, I think.
Welcome back.
Oh no, what happened?
We were just talking about Plan B. Where did it disappear? And there is something I wanted to share, a book I really got fond of from a Lebanese American financial analyst called Nicholas Taleb, Black Swan. And he's talking about the Plan Bs and how often we don't even think of highly unlikely scenarios. And that's what the whole book is about. And it's such an enjoyable read from an economist, you know. And you don't have to be knowledgeable about, finances or economics to enjoy the book. It has lots of historical, cultural, other references. And it just makes it super, super easy to see how much we rely on certainty and how how comfortable we get with certainty. And we tend to forget that there are so many other things as well out there. It's nice, it's good to be in this reality, so let's just use it. And as Laurence said before you got disconnected, Tamara, about how much we rely on the internet, and there is no plan B. And this is how this book recommendation came up.
And you said it's called Black Swan.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I think for the last 7 or 8 years, all I've really done is quality assurance and risk assessment for Saudi Aramco. So I think I look at everything now with worst case scenario planning in mind.
Yes, one of the areas where Middle Eastern countries I would risk, but I mostly have experience Oman, UAE, so probably I should limit it to those two countries. It's just my assumption saying that Middle Eastern countries is that there is a kind of beauty in how a long time is taken sometimes to have a decision, to make a decision. And when one decision is made, then 10 others are made. And maybe 9 of them will be changed after. And there is a little bit of experimentation as well as wisdom, dancing in a very intricate way. So it's a very interesting interaction between the two. But what it helps with is to get ready for something super unexpected, to start something, and if it doesn't work, just change it. Whereas in some other contexts, a long time is taken to make the decision, but once the decision is made, it's going to stay for a long time again before another decision is made. And what are we teaching again with these stories, with these examples to the members of the society, to the groups, and there is something coming from the leaders, but there is something, as Tamara, you mentioned, dictated and kind of enforced by the culture that region or country is in. So, and many other elements, I'm sure. But the joy of discovery, the joy of experimentation, it all goes back to schooling. It all goes back to the learning, where we try, and if it's good, we carry on. If it doesn't, we change it. And engineering probably is one of the best examples when it happens this way.
Well, to your point, Beatrix, I think the joy of learning and taking chances, making mistakes and growing from that, I think that we put a cap on that when we focus on grades, when we kind of stifle that learning then, because I think grades focus on memory, rather than skills acquired, or so the joy you're talking about, I think it's great, flexibility, we learn and we grow, we go back to the drawing board. But if there's a fear of failing, then that limits that risk taking, right? And if that's what we're teaching, then I don't think that we're going to progress very far. But if we're teaching this idea of taking risks, taking chances, learning, falling and getting back up, and reflecting, giving feedback, taking feedback, these are the skills that I think, whether or not the classroom, if there's a grade for it, A through B or whatever, or you're talking about a pass merit distinction for skills, I think that there needs to be an understanding, like Laurence, you mentioned those life skills. Those need to be embedded, because those are things that are actually going to help them through the different phases and stages of their lives, right? Because
But
let's face it.
there's so many topics that they need to be aware of. I mean, I'm looking here at a list that from my research, I've got 90 on this list. And in the last 2 weeks, we've added another 30 that have come from outside, not from us, but from outside internationally, that need to be added. And they all make sense. They all do. They all make sense. They're all necessary. But we can bring the most important ones in. And I think schools are trying. So collaboration, I think they could do better on that. Allowed to be innovative. Creativity. How do you teach? As a dean going around the colleges in charge of art and design, I was constantly asked, how do you teach creativity? Show me a way to teach my students creativity. Well, basically it's divergent thinking. So you can teach a technique for divergent thinking. There's a fantastic course at Michigan State University, a MOOC on creative ideation. Absolutely brilliant, really clever technique that you could teach a class in one lesson. You could teach them that. So it's really clever. And I just feel that there are possibilities out there. If you look at degree programs, inbuilt into an undergraduate degree is covertly preparation for a master's degree. The skill sets are built in. If you do a master's degree, you're going to be very well prepared for an interview for a PhD, because what you didn't realize is covertly inbuilt into your studies over that one in England or 2 years over in America, you are being prepared to do a doctorate. And I think we can do that if we're starting with 11-year-old or even younger in elementary school. We could leave the creativity that comes through young play, leave the creativity from group collaboration that you see in elementary schools, leave that through the high school system. Why not? Build it into the curriculum, build it into the the way classes work. Flip the classes, for goodness sake. Competitive group work. It's so easy to build these in covertly. You don't have to necessarily change the topics if you don't have permission to do so. It just takes brave administrators.
Very true.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, yes. It seems like we are very intuitively, we're summarizing and highlighting some points we already mentioned in this 1 hour. But in case you would like to to share a final thought or something that was a very important learning insight, then please grab this opportunity before we wrap up our live discussion.
Ladies first.
Sure. I'd like to end by, on a positive note, saying that, we are seeing changes in different pockets, like you mentioned, Laurence. And we do see a bridging of the gap with the technology and the social media and all of that, and what's available for students and teachers, the administration, the whole educational system. But I would encourage anyone watching and listening to consider the mindset that you have and change it from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And to reframe the message of what performance means, and focus on the outcomes, and let that be your guide.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tamara.
Thanks.
I feel I cannot add a lot more to it. I resonated with every word you said. That even we talked about systems and different countries and different ideas, popping up in the world of education, and changes we have seen, we are expecting, we are anticipating. It all comes down to the individual. So if you want to see a different world, then it starts with you. Starts looking at yourself, loving yourself, changing yourself, working on becoming a better person. And that's something that within our control. My own growth is within my control. So,
Yeah, but you have self-confidence. I don't think young people have the self-confidence to make those decisive decisions or even know how to put plans in place. I mean, one of the things they could be taught in school, for example, is project planning, milestones, risk mitigation. That could be built into a project assessment. You have a drafting process and you put feedback in at the end of every element of that thing being seen, that project or assignment being seen by the teacher, so that you get directed, meaningful, practical feedback on every few days as you move along. That I did a conference on it once. That simple template cuts out 14 problems in colleges, the worst of which, of course, is procrastination and plagiarism. Mm-hmm. Something as simple as that, one systemic change can make an enormous difference. But I think in summation from me, I think if grades could be shifted across to a more practical learning that takes place, for example, in colleges of further education, so competency-orientated learning, and the formative assessment practices used in apprenticeships or in further education, if that could be used in school, that would help young people enormously to be a bit more autonomous learners. But in that premise comes the need for academic study, purely for the sake of hierarchical academic study, needs to be shifted into opportunities for young people to choose their topics, choose the training they want, and the skill sets they're attracted to. And I think that's imperative. I really do.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Laurence and Tamara. It was absolutely a pleasure, and really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with both of you. Learned a lot from you. And everybody listening to us, please share your thoughts with us and let us know what is it that you learned from this conversation. What questions do you have? And join us next week when the Wednesday conversation is going to be in Arabic. See you then. Bye-bye.
Shukran jazilan. Thank you very much indeed. Take care. Bye, Akram. Take care. Bye.
See you.